Morning, everyone. I was just waiting a moment and let you know that Tutucket TV is filming today's breakfast, so I'm just giving it a minute. And, we're also going live with Facebook. So just give me 1 second. Okay, we've got the notice here. Welcome. Good morning. Mike Paulus. I'm the town manager for North Branford, and I'd like to welcome you to our 4th annual business breakfast and state of the town address. I can say that this is by far our largest turnout, and I'm so happy to see everyone this morning. And I know it's a little cold and getting a little sluggish and getting going this morning, but I appreciate your getting up early and coming to our annual breakfast. And we've got a great speaker today. And before I get to that, I'd just like to just acknowledge a few of our dignitaries today. I know that Senator Cohen is in the audience, along with Vinnie Candelora. We also have Mayor Viglione is here, Bob is here, council members Rose Angeloni, I'm not sure if I saw any others, and also our EDC, Economic Development Commission members are here as well. And just before I get into my State of the Town address, and I do want to keep things flowing and give as much time as I can for our guest speaker, I do want to recognize Liz Kaplan and have her say a few words about some of the things that EDC is doing briefly.
Good morning, and thank you for coming on this brisk morning. First of all, thank you for your business in North Branford. We appreciate you being in this lovely community, and I'd just like to acknowledge all our EDC members, if they could stand up. Joan Tudor, stand up. Jan Finch, Scott Small, and Dan Arman. They volunteer tirelessly on your behalf. So quickly, we have a new database system, a software system called Constant Contact. Maybe some of you have heard of it. And in the back of the room, there's a little sign-in sheet, but EDC members will be calling you. And we just want to make sure all your information is up to date so we can let you know very easily about events like this. Our sunflower project's about to kick off, so we want to make sure you get your seat so you can help make the town look beautiful. And so just please fill that out. And again, they will be calling you within the next couple of weeks, and myself included, as well as Gina and Roger. And thank you again for coming, and enjoy your morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. So now it's time for the State of the Town address, or State of the Town, status of the State of the Town. And I just, quite frankly, tell you that we're doing well. We're doing really well. And first and foremost, the town is healthy from a fiscal standpoint. Preliminary audit indications paint a very positive review, although they haven't been formally released. They think our trend of fiscal stability will be validated with the release of that audit report, which is coming out soon. We're in good shape. Standard & Poor's has recently reaffirmed our bond rating at AA+, which is great. It's as strong for a town of our size, and we take great pride in that. Our fund balance is healthy, and we continue to fund our pensions appropriately based on the recommendations of our actuary, and we'll continue to be in good shape doing those things. And we're in good shape because we keep growing our grant list, and that is supporting the people and businesses who make North Branford strong. And that, of course, is you, the people in this room. We thank you for your business. We thank you for your growth and development, and we're doing everything we can to partner with you. And that's part of the reason why we're here today is, and every year, and this is our 4th, is to send that message that we are here as your partner, and we hope and strive to do the best we can to help you. So North Branford has added a few new attractions, and we continue to successfully use our assessment deferral program, which helps businesses expand their operation. Our grant list, as I mentioned, has grown and is in positive territory. We continue to market the town's agro-tourism niche, which is pretty interesting. Our trends look good, but we do have some challenges, for sure. We don't have a major interstate 95 or 91 running through, and 1/3 of our land mass is controlled by the Regional Water Authority. Is not available for development. So those are challenges, but it doesn't stop us from growing. Not stopping from us from growing, and helping businesses expand and working with what we have. We certainly consider the Regional Water Authority as an important economic partner, as we do Tilcon, Honeywell, Evergreen Woods, Big Y, the Sports Complex, the Ice Pavilion, ESI, Penn Globe, and of course our farmers and booming agricultural businesses, small and mid-sized businesses that make our community so great, like many of you in this room. So it's a great fabric of business and big and small, and we're trying to do the best we can to kind of leverage the success and keep moving on. So how do we overcome these challenges and where do we go from here? We continue to build on our success. We continue to build the partnership, and we'll continue to welcome and assist new businesses. We have a good team to do that. Roger Salway is our economic development coordinator and our point person, our contact. He's been a great addition to the team here at town, and along with our administrators. We're working to streamline and improve our regulatory and permitting process to help assist business development. And they've been working really hard at that and putting a lot of outreach and trying to make contact, get to know as many businesses as we can. So, as I mentioned, one of our most successful initiatives has been the use of the assessment deferral program, which is driven by Carrie Duquesne, Dave Ambrose, and Roger. It's a program that helps business expand through a phase-in of taxes on building improvements. The town council has already approved 4 applicants since we started the program. Some of them you may know, may have heard of. We have Don Capelli. Don's here. He's gone through that. Vin Capasso, Al Rose, and Victor Pediandria. Those businesses have applied and been approved. We think it's a great tool, and we hope to continue to talk about that and help businesses that are looking to expand so that we can retain and expand those businesses. We also are building on the success of our farming community with our farm trail brochure by attracting visitors through agritourism. Our attractions have grown from 2019. Obviously, we've added the Rose Vineyards and Winery and DeFrancesco's Farm Brewery, the first farm brewery in the region. And so we continue to work on that, and if that wasn't enough of a draw, we have our sunflowers, of course, and major attraction. Special thanks to Larry Auger and our many volunteers for putting North Branford on the map. There's a lot of interest and enthusiasm for sunflowers, as you can imagine. Lots of folks stop by and participate, which is great, and we look forward to next season, and a special thanks to the 2020 sponsors. Mark DeLungo and his family is going to help jumpstart us again for this year. We've also successfully completed another development project called Destination North Branford. That includes a promotional video, showcases the town and our businesses, which is great. I know that some of you have seen that, but if you haven't, please take a look at that. And finally, I'd like to say a word or two about the potential that exists in the state to develop paths for careers in advanced manufacturing. I believe there's an unprecedented opportunity for the state to create programs that will produce skilled labor to meet the shortage among advanced manufacturers in our area, and the state and North Branford is part of that effort. And we're at the table. We're part of those discussions, and we keep promoting that. And hope that we continue to be part of the dialogue taking place in Connecticut. And with Roger's help and others, we're actively engaged in developing partnerships and helping build the pipeline, if you will. So we're looking forward to the rebirth and advance of manufacturing in not only here in North Branford, but in the state of Connecticut. So that pretty much wraps up the state of the town. I tried to cover a lot of ground, but also tried to reserve as much time as we can for our guest speaker today. And as you know, it's David Lehman from DECD is a commissioner of Connecticut Economic Development Community. the agency that oversees a wide range of programs promoting business retention, recruitment, brownfield development, the arts, historic preservation, and of course, tourism. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce David Lehman. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a real honor to have you.
Thank you, Mike. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, that's great. Perfect. This is definitely the biggest microphone I've talked in front of in a while. Just before I get started, let me say, when I heard AA rating and fully funding your pension funds, I typically don't have any conversations that have either of those two words in there. So it is so great to be here in North Branford and hear how well the town is doing and focused on economic development. Before I get started, I just want to say thanks to the mayor, and I know we have Rep. Candelora and Senator Cohen here in the back, and Roger Solway and the whole EDC here. It's great to be here, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, Colin Cooper, the new manufacturing czar, is going to be here in a month or so. So you'll get to hear a lot more about advanced manufacturing and what we at the state level are doing to encourage that growth, because it is a very real shortfall. You can call it the silver tsunami, but we're at a point now where we're in a tight labor market, and the growth of manufacturing jobs for the first time in generations really is outpacing the amount of supply that we have. And that's you could say it's a high quality problem, but it's a problem we need to deal with to make sure that it's not a constraint for our manufacturers to grow here in the state of Connecticut, that there is access to talent. So I'll talk a bit more about that, but that's a big initiative of the governor. Before I get started, though, I'm going to do something which I typically don't do in these speeches, but I think it's important, which is I think we should take a very objective look at the economic data, and then we can talk about where we're going to go, because I think the data is very informative. First things first, long-term data is really what we should focus on. You can look at a month or a quarter or even a year, in my opinion, and really have a significant takeaway. But if you look at and I want to talk about GDP, employment, and income growth first. If you look at GDP first and foremost, so output at the state level, and there's a significant lag, but just last week, or maybe the preceding week, the Q3 GDP numbers for 2019 came out. And Connecticut's growth was in line with the country at 2.1%. That's up significantly versus 1% in the preceding quarter. But if you look at what 2019 looks like for the first 3 quarters, and we'll have the full year in April, it looks like Connecticut's growth for the year is going to be in line with median states, somewhere between 20 and 30 if you're to rank the states. That's not where we have been, and I think it's important. If you look at it over a 10-year period, Connecticut's certainly been in the bottom quartile, but the recent output numbers show us more closer to the median. And this is really driven by manufacturing, both durable and non-durable goods. So that is a real strength of ours right now. But I think it's important to at least recognize that the recent economic data is a lot better than the 10-year trend. Obviously, that can change, and we need to focus on that relentlessly. But economic data is a little bit better as it relates to GDP. If you look at employment growth, we still are not doing what we need to do there. So employment growth over the last 12 months, the state has generated around 6,000 jobs exclusive of government. Government jobs continue to get smaller. That's a trend that I think will continue for years to come. But if you look at that, so that's roughly 0.3% of our labor force. If you look at the states that are really growing in that top quartile, which is where we want to be, they're creating 1 to 1.5% increases in their labor force each year. So for Connecticut, we have a labor force of around 1.7 million, so that's 17,000 to around 25,000 jobs per year. We're creating 6,000. So we are not performing well as it relates to job growth. There are some macro trends here that I think are at work. Our population has not been growing. Right? To really grow jobs, we need more people in the state, more people that are employed. What I think is upside in terms of the jobs picture, because again, we'll need to solve the population and the overall environment to really move the needle on jobs. One thing Connecticut has done a pretty good job over the past year is our underemployment. So this is the U6 for those that might be economic wonks here in the room. So those that are not working to as much as they want to or at a wage that they want to, it's called the U6 rate. So for Connecticut, that went from, I believe, 7.9 to around 6.8. I might be getting the numbers slightly off, but it's decreased by 110 basis points over the past 12 months, which is great because more people that want to work more or in higher wage industries are doing that. And that actually outperformed. If you look at the U.S., I think it contracted by 70 or 80 basis points. So we're in full employment, 3.7% unemployment here in the state versus 3.5% as a country, a little bit higher, but our underemployment rate has come down more. And when you think about if you could see continued convergence between the unemployment rate and the underemployment rate, in my mind, there's at least 40,000 people in the state of Connecticut that we don't need to convince to come here in terms of getting them jobs and jobs that they can do in manufacturing or other core industries. So that's something we'll need to track as we want to create jobs. How can we get the underemployed the right skills to really drive output in the economy? The last thing I want to talk about quickly is income growth. So if you look at income growth for 2019, my anticipation is it's around 3.5% for Connecticut, and if you look at the country, it's around 4.5%. So these are big numbers. A lot of it was spurred by the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, in my opinion, of 2 years ago at the federal level, but we still are not performing at an income growth level that we need to. Now, the counterpoint to this is Connecticut, even with the sluggish growth that we've seen, is still a top decile state for median household income. We're number 5 or number 6, depending on how you slice it. So we have very high incomes, high education levels in the state. Clearly, there's some high expenses and costs as well, which we can talk more about. But how do we continue to grow our income at a very fast level when it already is high? Because certain businesses and investments are going to go to lower cost locales. We need to make sure that people see the value proposition in Connecticut, because we need to make sure for our residents in particular, we want to make sure that the economic growth is sustainable and, importantly, inclusive. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So we want to make sure those income levels for those that are at the median and below are seeing at least median or above median income growth. And we'll talk a little bit more about how we plan to do that. So I start with the economic numbers for a couple of reasons. One, I think first and foremost there is, and I noticed this in my travels around the state now that I've been in the job for 11 months, there is a negativity that many have. And I think some of it, candidly, is warranted. And we should talk frankly about the data and what the data says. But I don't think the recent data, I'll hedge a little bit on this, but I don't think the recent data is as nearly as negative as people think it is. I think there's this perception that Connecticut's this horrific place to do business. Yes, there's things we need to change, and we can talk about that a lot today. But I think the recent data is more positive than I think a lot of the mentalities in the state. So when I'm talking to business folks and groups like this, I think it's really important that we objectively look at the data, and this is not a partisan comment, but we make sure that our attitude reflects what we're seeing in the actual data as opposed to this pervasive negativity, because I don't think it's appropriate or warranted based on the data. The second important point, and why I started with those numbers, is I do think it really informs when we think about how to grow GDP or incomes or jobs. How are we going to do that? Because I mentioned population at the outset. We are not going to see, in my opinion, unless things change meaningfully, population growth that is above median. The whole Northeast isn't seeing it. Even stars like Massachusetts, which has one of the strongest economies and the strongest job creation track records here, I think it's going to be tough to foresee that, because the migration in the country has been south and has been west, and that's been the case for decades. So I think we really need to focus on how can we get our underemployed better paying jobs? How do we bring those jobs to the state? How can we enhance retention, especially of college students? Some of you guys might know this fact, but 40% of the college students that come here stay here. So we import a lot of college students, and then unfortunately we export them. We need to change little things like that to increase the stickiness of Connecticut so people see those opportunities here. And then on the income numbers, I mentioned that it's really clear to me, at least, and hopefully I'll be persuade this group and others, but we really need to focus on raising incomes for those that have not participated, because we have high incomes, we're a higher cost state, but I think we need to make sure that folks understand we're a high value state that has fiscal stability. And again, I realize that's not our reputation right now, but we need to change that. Okay. So, to me, there's 4 what I call pillars of economic growth for long-term sustainable economic growth. So first and foremost, it is fiscal stability, and I'm going to talk about that at the state level. We're not at the level of North Branford yet in terms of credit rating and pension fundedness, but we need to get there. The second point is workforce and education and talent, which has long been a strength of the state of Connecticut, but we need to make sure that we don't lose that edge. Third is transportation and infrastructure, which is critically important to every economy. And the fourth point is our cities. And this is something I have a particular passion about. We could talk more about how communities like North Branford will benefit from a strong New Haven or a strong Hartford. But I think we really need to make critical investments in our cities over the next 20 years to make sure that they are competitive as it relates to people wanting to live and work in those places. First on fiscal stability, just a few points here, and some of you probably follow this, but maybe some don't. But if you look at the 2019 budget that was passed by the legislature and the governor, there was no tax rate increases. There were a few credits that were scaled back, as well as a broadening of the sales tax, but the governor's very focused on not raising taxes as it relates to those rates on income and beyond, because the state has done this 3 times over the past 10 years, and candidly, we're a higher tax state. I don't think we can tax our way out of this, and I don't think we should try, because I think it defeats, candidly, the investment that we want and the fiscal stability that we need to get that investment. If you look at the spending levels there, spending was basically in line with inflation for the first year and a little bit higher than it in the second year. And then the governor's been very, very focused on what he calls the debt diet. You know, the state has borrowed up to $2 billion a year, if you look empirically, and there's a big desire to scale that back. You know, we're going to still borrow, and borrowing is important for certain investments, but we need to make sure the return on investment is there for any state borrowing, because, you know, people use the term bond, and to me that means credit card. It doesn't mean free money. So we need to make sure that we're very smart about what we bond and measured in terms of the bonding. So the governor's still working on that with the legislature in terms of what a bonding bill will look like. And the last point I want to make on this is the state has a 2.5 going to 2.7 by the end of June $1 billion rainy day fund. So our overall levels of debt are quite high relative to other states, but the rainy day fund, the cushion we have against a recession or needing to raise those tax rates, is actually top quartile. That's roughly 14% of the state's annual revenues, and that's the highest both as a percentage basis and in absolute terms that the state has ever had. So we should feel good about that, you know, when and if, I should say if, when this rainy day does come, having that cushion is really, really important. 2 other things I want to point out in terms of fiscal stability that I think have been positives and noted. First off, the bond market has taken notice of this. So the 2 rating agencies have either put us on watch for upgrade or taken us off a watch for a further downgrade, which is important. Hopefully we'll be talking about an upgrade in a year or so, but that is a nice positive message from the rating agencies, where we've seen our bond rating go down over the past few years. And then perhaps more importantly, if you look at how state of Connecticut bonds have performed over the past 12 months, Connecticut actually had the best performing bonds in the municipal credit market of all the large states that Bloomberg, which tracks this, looks at. You know, our yield spreads, so the price over the base bond rate that Connecticut pays to borrow money, went from 90 basis points, or almost 1%, and it contracted by half of that. So that's good for a couple of reasons. One, it means the market views Connecticut as less risky. We're getting our fiscal house in order. But where that hits all of us is we're going to pay less to borrow. So when we borrow money in the future, we're going to do it at a lower rate, like refinancing a mortgage, which is really important. The last point on fiscal stability is the governor with the legislature recently reached agreement with Connecticut hospitals. There was a big cloud of litigation, or there was litigation in terms of what that settlement would look like or what the expense could be. The governor reached agreement with the hospitals over the past month, or 2 months ago, and this was recently approved by the legislature and executed. So the reduced downside from what that litigation could have cost Connecticut residents is definitely another monkey off our back and uncertainty off our back, which is a real positive. So having this fiscal stability, continuing it, and what I've learned is, I've been around the state enough now, I can say, or the governor can say, we could say, we're going to do this, but the reality is people rightly, in my mind, look in the rearview mirror and understand, well, politicians say that. And by the way, I was in the private sector for 20 years before I started working for the governor, so I'm not a politician, but we as a government need to earn the fiscal stability, that cred. We're not going to get it by saying it, we're going to get it by doing it, and not raising taxes 3 times over the next 10 years. Because if we say it and then we keep raising taxes, well then, you've lost all that credibility. So we're going to need to, the government's going to need to earn this from you all and others over time, but I just want to make sure everyone understands the last 12 months, I think there have been some very, very positive things on that at this point. Secondly, talent and workforce. So this is critical. So if you look at the numbers here, Connecticut, roughly 40% of Connecticut's residents have a bachelor's degree or higher. That's kind of an old way to think about talent and workforce. Right now, especially in manufacturing, there's a lot of skills and credentials and trainings that you can do without a college degree, where you can get paid a living wage and then some in this state. The average wage for manufacturing jobs in the state is over $90,000. Some of you may be aware of that, but they are phenomenal jobs, and Connecticut has a real comparative advantage in manufacturing. So there's a couple initiatives that are at work here. The primary one is what's called the Governor's Workforce Council. So other states do this, like Maryland, Colorado, just to name two, where there's, under the authorization of the governor, working with the legislature, a council of 24 members, 13 of which are from the private sector. So there's CEOs from, not just manufacturing, but bioscience, financial services, really across the board, and not just big businesses, but small businesses as well. And I mention this because states that do workforce well and talent well, the private sector is telling educators, the public sector, and not-for-profits what they need. Here are the skills they need. Here's what they want to hire, as opposed to government or educators making assumptions about what that is, because then something's lost in translation. So led by the private sector, everyone's around the same table figuring out, what do we need to have a best-in-class workforce? How can we have the most skilled and credentialized workers for manufacturing and for other areas to make sure that hiring people should not be a constraint to everyone in this room as you're thinking about your business? Business is tough enough. You shouldn't have to worry, can I get the people? And many do worry about that in the state of Connecticut. So the Workforce Council will come out later this year with its action plan, not a strategy, but an action plan and what they're going to do. But there's a lot of momentum around this, which I think is a really positive thing. I mentioned Colin Cooper previously. Colin has been in the state for 25 years as a manufacturer, recently joined the Lamont administration as the chief manufacturing officer. He is working very, very hard, going around the state, talking to folks, figuring out what can we do to make sure that manufacturers in particular are getting what they need from the state. So two examples of initiatives that we're working on right now. One is, some of you may be familiar, there was a manufacturers innovation fund that was previously funded in the Malloy administration. The bonding has basically come to an end, or the funding has come to an end. It was through bonding, but we're having discussions, in particular for smaller manufacturers, how can we make sure they're getting what they need from the state as it relates to apprenticeship, incumbent worker training, and other important programs to make sure that they're competitive with manufacturers, not just in Connecticut, but outside of the state. The other main initiative that we're focused on is access to capital for manufacturers in particular. Manufacturing is a very capital-heavy business. Is the private sector providing what small manufacturers in particular need? This is not about a Sikorsky or a Pratt & Whitney or an Electric Boat. They clearly are big companies that have access to capital. But the median manufacturer in the state of Connecticut has between 20 and 25 employees, I believe. The average manufacturer has around 40. Let's make sure that those folks can compete, as the manufacturing sector grows overall. So we'll continue to work on that. But the workforce and talent, I'm focusing a lot on manufacturing here, I realize, but that is a strength of ours that we want to make sure we remain on the cutting edge, and we're really looking to the private sector to take a leadership role there. So the council will meet for the second time this upcoming month, and a gentleman named Garrett Moran, who ran a not-for-profit previously, is heading that up for the governor. Thirdly, transportation, and I won't go too deep into this, but we can talk about it maybe in the Q&A, but transportation, for all the reasons you'd expect, is just critical for an economy that works. When you or your employees are held up in traffic, or goods and services aren't getting around the state because of traffic or poor roads, that's a problem, because we are competing. And when I talk to businesses about coming here, one of the first things that I hear after we talk about taxes in the state's fiscal situation is typically transportation. It's very difficult to recruit people or make us an attractive place when my employees are sitting in traffic for an hour each way each day. So again, depending on where I am in the state and what type of business, it matters more or less, but the transportation and strong infrastructure is really important. And that's not just roads, but mass transit, in my opinion, as well as an airport here in south central Connecticut. Very, very important. The governor's been working with the legislature on this, and hopefully in the next 2 weeks there is closure on a plan, which is roughly $20 billion in spend over 10 years. A lot of that is to get up to what's called state of good repair, but there are going to be some proactive investments, I would say, to enhance mass transit, look at an airport, and really make the roads and the traffic reduce by reducing some of the bottlenecks. So some of you probably read the newspapers on this on a regular basis. I'm happy to take any questions on transportation, but don't want to go into it too much more right now. The last pillar I would mention is what I call broadly urban strategy. And my argument here is a simple one. Some may agree, some may disagree with it, but Connecticut as a state, we really benefited in the 70s, 80s, and the early 90s when cities were dangerous, people didn't want to live there, be educated there. The reality is that has changed dramatically, starting in the mid-90s in my opinion, but certainly since the Great Recession for the past 10 or 12 years. where where we in Connecticut benefited from cities being a dangerous place for businesses and people, they're now an attractive place. And that has been a headwind for us as we've tried to grow our economy, in my opinion, because we haven't had that big city or that big city feel. We offer it in some places, but we really don't have it. And I'm not suggesting we should compete with a New York or Boston head-on, because they're much bigger and we just won't win that. But I think we need to offer more of a city-like experience to businesses and residents. And you don't need to, even if you disagree with me, let's just talk about some of the numbers. So in a couple studies that were out recently, one of which you may have seen, over the past 10 years, 90% of the tech job growth in the country was in 5 labor market areas: Boston, San Francisco, San Jose, San Diego, and one other one in California I'm blanking on right now. But 4 in California and Boston. So if you think about how the economy is changing, how jobs are changing, and I'm not saying Silicon Valley is coming right here next week or next month, but they've all gone to big cities in that example. And if you look at beyond just technology jobs, and McKinsey did a study on this recently, they basically forecasted, they looked at the past 10 years, and they forecast over the next 30 years, where is the job growth going to be? Living wage jobs and higher, and the vast majority of those jobs are forecasted, and there's risk in this, to be in large cities. Again, manufacturing, I think, is an exception, just given what you need to be competitive there. But I don't think we can ignore that. I think we need to focus on building up our cities in terms of population, vibrancy, density. Obviously, a lot of this needs to be embraced at the city level from a zoning perspective, and there's real investments that need to be done here. But I think it's critical, because when I think about growing the state's population, I think you want to put more people in cities, more people focused on mass transit, transit-oriented development, not more cars on 91 or 95, in my opinion. So a couple other things that we're doing to really encourage this. One, there's a big effort as it relates to our opportunity zones. We held a conference in New Haven at the end of last October. There were 400 people present. We're very focused on making it simple and easy to invest in Connecticut's opportunity zones. There's a website, ctopportunityzone.com, which catalogs all of our zones, has shovel-ready projects there. As it relates to incentives for job creation, we're focused on looking at our cities and trying, to the extent that we can, make it easier for folks to invest and create those jobs in cities. We can talk a bit more about what that means, but if you look at our cities, just go back to the unemployment rate, our cities generally have 5 to 6% unemployment, whereas the state as a whole is 3.7. So areas, suburban areas tend to have lower, close to 2%, 2.5 to 3% unemployment rate. So making sure that we really enable our cities and make it easy to invest and really work with the cities to welcome that job growth, and the zoning that's going to need to accompany it, I think, is really critical for the state in the future. All right, so 2020, what are we trying to get done beyond these pillars? So first off, we're working on right now what I call an economic action plan, and this will be rolled out formally over the next month, maybe 6 weeks at this point in time. But what are the 5 to 10 key initiatives that we want to do, and some of which I talked about here, like focusing on cities. There's going to be a big place-based component to this. When I think about Connecticut, I think we really want to focus on industries that can grow and thrive in our economy, where they have a real comparative advantage, and focus on place. And one word which I like to use a lot, which I haven't yet today, I think, is innovation. We are the 4th most innovative state measured by Bloomberg, right behind California, Massachusetts, and Washington State. Let's make sure we're innovating, and that's not just a tech term. That's obviously a manufacturing term. It's healthcare, it's life sciences, it's even fintech and insurtech. So what Connecticut's good at, let's make sure that we embrace innovation with a place-based effort to really create ecosystems. Again, my argument is if you have a very, very strong and vibrant New Haven, a Branford and North Branford, et cetera, all are going to be beneficiaries of that, whether it's just people, tourism, or businesses that are going to be migrating to these areas. That's really, really critical. 3 things on the legislative front that we're going to hope to work with the legislature on this year. One, we're going to dramatically change how the state has done incentives. So previously, the state had been giving out a fair amount of money in the form of loans, grants, and forgivable loans to businesses, both big and small. We're really going to rely on the private sector, given where the lending is right now, to do a lot of the lifting in terms of capital investment in businesses. The state's still going to incentivize job growth, but we're going to do it in a way that is less costly and less risky to taxpayers. The second thing that we're going to focus on is small business lending. The state has become a very big small business lender over the past 8 years. I just don't think that's necessary anymore, and it's not what we do at the government level as a core. So the Small Business Express program, which has been a key part of Connecticut's, the DECD, we're really going to look to the private sector to pick up the slack as it relates to lending. That we will likely focus on underserved markets, urban areas, minority and women-owned businesses in a greater extent, but again, probably not direct. We're going to focus on guarantee structures where we can let the private sector, not just banks, but other non-bank lenders, they're going to be the front end of the underwriting, the client experience, and if the state's taking some guarantee risk there to make sure that there's a competitive cost of capital, we're going to do that, but we're going to get out of the direct lending business. The other thing that I want to focus on is what I'll broadly call regulatory modernization. There's certain things in Connecticut, and I find when I say regulatory reform, this means different things to different people. So I think we need to have a real hard look at our regulatory code. Some of this is by statute, but some of this is just in executive branch agencies, and make sure there's a real cost-benefit analysis done with all the regulations we have in the state. Because what I've found is there are a lot of regulations that are put on the books, and people get busy, and ultimately some of those regulations stay there, and we need to make sure that we have regulations that the benefit outweighs the costs, that work not just for businesses, but that also work for individuals. Because regulations, and there have been some good data on this, they can be regressive, not enabling people to get higher paying jobs that they deserve and should have the opportunity to have. So that's a third initiative I mentioned that we're going to focus on. So I'm going to stop with that, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
I have a question. So I think one of the many benefits we have to North Branford is that we are in an ideal location. We're not Boston, we're not New York, but we can be there within 2 hours. What is the state doing to capitalize on our location? Like, is there any discussions as to what we're going to do about our airport here in East Haven, or perhaps the harbor, New Haven Harbor, being able to modify that so we can attract more business and utilize that with rail?
Sure. Well, a couple things. So on the infrastructure front, figuring out, Sikorsky versus Tweed is a debate that continues to happen, and I don't have the answer sitting before you today, but I feel very strongly you need to have a real regional airport in South Central Connecticut, because whether you're here in North Branford or New Haven and you're explaining to someone that they need to go up to Bradley or to Providence or New York, that's not persuasive in terms of business. That's going back to the point, time and traffic is costly, and it's just not attractive. So airport, absolutely. Making sure the rail system, in particular from New Haven going to New York City and then going the other way, that we have a state-of-the-art station at Union Station in New Haven, that we reduce track times where we can. I think all of that is critical. Is that a silver bullet? It's probably not, but making sure that there's a very clear investment in infrastructure, signaling to residents and businesses that we're taking transportation seriously, I think is critical. Beyond that, though, what I found in my conversations with business, I think there's this perception that the pitch of Connecticut's close to Boston and New York, and we're 40% cheaper, come here. That alone is not persuasive. That's helpful, the fact that we are lower costs. But you see businesses, despite the higher costs, still going to Boston, New York. So that's why, in my mind, part of the other thing that we're, when I think about benefit North Branford is, I do think we want to make sure that New Haven continues to get the right amount of investment and the right amount of, again, this innovation ecosystem in healthcare and bioscience in particular, I think is really critical. And I think if we get that right, is New Haven going to be Cambridge? That's probably a stretch, but is New Haven going to have half of that or 3/4 of that? I think it absolutely can and should, with the IP coming out of Yale and what you have with Yale and Yale New Haven Hospital. So I think what you're going to see from us is a much bigger focus on building out that ecosystem in places like New Haven or Hartford, and then the region benefiting as a result of that. So, and I do think you'll see more, and this is not just residents, but you'll see more businesses that say, all right, New Haven's not for me, but New Haven is like Boston or Boston-esque, and we want to be in North Branford. So, and what you're going to see from us in terms of incentives and where we're focusing the state monies, that we're going to focus a lot more on place as opposed to try to be all things to industries. So just one other data point before we go on is bonding in DECD year over year is down 70%. So we've given out a lot less money this year, and I anticipate doing the same next year. We want to try to utilize some of those monies for place-based investments in these innovation ecosystems. Sir? Yep.
As an industrial commercial real estate person, I think that one of the two largest concerns, I won't use the word problems, but I'd like to, that Connecticut has is something you touched on. Try to guard my words.
No, speak freely.
Over-
We are on TV though.
Oh, we're on TV?
That's fine. Sorry. It won't be the first time someone's.
Overregulation. For example, the Connecticut, as I understand it, is one of 2 states out of 50, not 55.
I know where you're going with this.
President
Yeah.
said,
Transfer Act.
that has the Commercial Real Estate Transfer Act. It is insane. It is crazy. The craziest part of it is that if a company ships more than 100 kilograms or ships less frequently than 90 days, they become an establishment, which taints that property forever. That situation calls for a fine, not a taint on the property. Every day as a commercial realtor, I deal with this, and a property owner. I have to watch my tenants very carefully. There are properties we can't sell because of environmental concerns, none of which have I ever seen in 52 years other than the Love Canal in New York, that negatively impacted health and occupancy. This is insane. They've been messing around with it for 15 years, trying to modify it. There's a move now on this one aspect of the establishment when you have bills of lading that.
Yeah. Are you part of the Transfer Act working group? Are you part of the Transfer Act working group?
I am not.
So they're
Intentional.
Okay. So for those that may not be as.
I'm way too old.
We just went very deep in the weeds. So the Transfer Act, us in New Jersey are the only states that have it. It really adds to the uncertainty of buying or selling a commercial property that, there may or may not have been some type of contamination at some point in the past. This is the Cliff Notes version. It's a problem. And I do think the working group, and Katie Dykes, the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Protection and Energy, I talk to her daily about this. The working group, I think, is making real progress, and hopefully we're trying to get. Oh, it is. You have to take my word on this for now, but the goal is to get legislation.
I think it's too slow.
Well, so the question here is the goal is to minimize what gets caught up as an establishment, and ultimately make it easier to transfer properties where you don't get caught up in the act. Basically, to minimize the funnel, in my mind. The longer-term goal, though, is so other states have what's called a release-based system, where if you contaminate, you report it, and then it gets fixed, whether it's fined, remediated, et cetera. That's what Massachusetts has. That's what other states has. I think that's where we should be 5-10 years out. But adopting that with a snap, I think, is hard. But I actually think the progress that is being made.
Well, we adopted the Transfer Act in a snap.
Wow. I was I think it started in the 60s or 80s, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that's where we want to get to as a release-based system. I am constructive, and we can perhaps take this offline with the progress that's going to be made this year.
I mentioned it to you because I think you could have some meaningful input.
They love me, trust me. Yeah. No, I agree. It's a concern, and it is something. Again, when I'm back in North Branford in the summer, we'll see if I'm right or wrong on this one. Did you have a second question, sir, before we go on?
No.
Okay. Ma'am.
So you talked about innovation. Do you see that as extending the current innovation places model that's in place, or something different?
Different. What I've learned, and again, there's no silver bullet in any of this, but what I've learned is we really want to focus on transformational innovation hubs in areas, so that means in my mind professional incubators, for example, a real effort to create a place where you have, for manufacturing or insurance or bioscience or technology broadly, we really want to try to build that ecosystem, because that's what I think the pitch is ultimately in the future. It's Connecticut's close to Boston and New York, and we're up to 40 or 50% less expensive, and you can get the talent and workforce. And we've got this key ecosystem that is tangible from a vibrancy and culture perspective. we need to get to work on creating that ecosystem in a very cost-efficient way. So it'll likely be public-private partnerships, in cities or regions focused on these industries where I think we already have a comparative advantage and we really want to lean into it. There's another question, ma'am.
You talked about looking at Massachusetts, specifically Boston, larger cities. I'm speaking from a family of 3 children, 2 of which have relocated to Boston and Massachusetts, and making our cities more like these attractive cities. To me, New Haven looks more like Boston than Hartford, yet there's so much funding going to our capital. And I understand that's a bigger city, it is the capital and so on, but I'm thinking if you want to attract businesses and you want to attract talent, the talent is going to go to where they're going to enjoy a city that is like a Boston or New York. We have Yale New Haven Hospital, we have a theater district, we have a downtown restaurant population. I think it looks more, and I've worked in Hartford, it looks more like the attractiveness of Boston or New York than Hartford. And I didn't know whether you were going to put more of a focus on that or still pour money into Hartford.
Listen, I think there's, again, let's put politics aside. Well, 2 things. First off, I will admit to having what I call Massachusetts envy. If you go back, it used to be Taxachusetts, 20, 25 years ago. They've lowered their tax rates. They are no longer Taxachusetts. And Connecticut arguably was Massachusetts in the early 90s and has, become where we are today, where, our economic growth and job growth has been sluggish. So the beautiful thing about government, in my opinion, is there's an existing play that I think we want to run, and I think we do want to look north and try to emulate much of what Massachusetts has done over the past 20 years and bring it to Connecticut, because I think it works. On the point on Hartford and New Haven, I think both cities have their own distinct qualities. Certain people, New Haven is their preference and what they find more attractive, and others feel that about Hartford. So I think the very short answer is we're going to embrace both cities, and I think we're supposed to. I don't think that you as in the state we're supposed to say we're going to put all the chips on New Haven or Stamford or Bridgeport or Hartford. I think we're really supposed to focus on some of our biggest cities where we have this advantage and work with all of them. And again, that doesn't mean 10, but in my mind that means 3 or 4. I don't think we can be a strong state also without a strong capital city. I feel pretty strongly
I
about that.
acknowledge that, yeah.
So, did that answer your question?
Sure.
Sir?
So I'm glad that you touched on regulation at the end, because I think it's a huge hidden cost to business. And most small businesses that I deal with don't even realize what they're going to face until they go to apply for something, a new building, new development. And then most of the small businesses that I deal with are astounded by the regulations that they have to go through, zoning, environmental, and I actually, what Kevin said about the transfer. But, and by the way, North Branford is one of the easiest towns to do business with around here in terms of what the town does for regulation and how they help businesses. But what can you do at the state level when you have 169 towns, all with different zoning regulations, different building codes, enforcing them different ways?
So there's a couple. That's a great question, and I think that is, you could say at the state level we want to address it, but a lot of the P&Z and beyond is at the town level, and there's a big, I'll be direct, a NIMBY element to much of Connecticut, where even if the state is encouraging it or a business wants it, we at the local level can make it difficult. In particular with higher density multifamily, that's happened in a few different areas. So the 2 things I mentioned that I think the state can do is, one, there is this digital front door initiative under Lamont that Josh Jabal is heading up, which is basically try to streamline the interface you guys have. So if you're talking to DRS or Labor, or the Secretary of State, make sure there is really, I'd love to say it's going to be an Amazon-like experience, but something like that to make it easy, where you don't have 3 different passwords and you're filling out all these reams of paper. So that effort is underway. There was funding for that in the budget that the legislature and the governor did, and I'm positive that will have an impact. But in terms of the coordination with the local level, in my mind, the template we want to use here is we want to, and again, politics aside, but ideally you want to set a role model of companies, municipalities that basically do streamlined zoning. where it can be electronic. And in the capital region, there is an analog here right now to basically make sure that the zoning is streamlined electronic. And you want to hold that up as we want municipalities to be there. Now, can there be a carrot or a stick that should be associated with that? I'd hope so, but you ultimately get into the independence of these municipalities, and the state wants to encourage it, but I'm not sure how much beyond that we can do.
So this thing that Josh is doing, has there been a task force of commercial brokers or other people similar to what the Transfer Act Task Force put together to kind of aid with that? Or?
I don't believe there is a task force like there is a Transfer Act. There was $6 million of funding. I'm not sure what outside counsel is advising him on that, or if it's just the state, the team that he has around him. But they've been making some headway, and I'm hopeful there'll be more on that later this year in terms of showing folks like yourself, this is what it's actually going to look like, and this is how it's going to save you time and money and paper. Okay, you got more to come on that, so
Yeah.
I realize you'll believe it when you see it. I take the point. Sir, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, two comments. One is, I think early on you mentioned this sense of negativity. I call it a morale problem. I think Connecticut has a morale problem because we knew what we were. We don't feel like we're that anymore. Matter of fact, I think many of us are trying to figure out what we are at this point. Here we are in this absolutely beautiful state with all these natural resources and all these wonderful gifts that we've got, and yet we don't feel that. So I'm wondering if there's any talk or any sense of a real serious, true effort to remarket or rebrand Connecticut, and start small pieces of lifting that morale. Instead of closing welcome centers, maybe we need to do opposite kind. So that's comment number one. And number two, I'm a small developer. I work in several towns along the shoreline in another state. And I have to tell you that, and we're well associated, we're well acquainted with other, what I consider really good developers who want to do good projects, who want to do win-win projects. And our feeling, I think I speak collectively, our feeling is that when you get involved with agencies like inland wetlands, when you get involved especially with DEP, the attitude is almost adversarial from the beginning. Almost feeling like, is everybody overreaching here? Is there a mechanism in place where we really can sit down and hash these things out rather than come at them as an us and them?
So let me just respond to both quickly. So on the marketing front, I wholeheartedly agree. We need to do a better job as it relates to the brand. What is the state of Connecticut? I think, and listen, the welcome centers, they're open now. I agree that was not the right move, but when it comes to money, the tough decisions need to be made, and that was made in the past. But they're open now, and I think they should remain open, is my view. But we need to do a better job branding us, and this is not just to business, but this is to residents and who we are. So you're kind of hearing a bit of an appeal from me that we should be known much more than we are as a state of innovation. Do I think we should have a tagline, though, like the Still Revolutionary? I personally don't, just because if you look empirically, a few states have done taglines well. I love New York, Virginia, Fair Lovers are two examples. But most states don't do taglines well. So I think you can spend a lot of money, come up with a tagline, and then it very likely will fail. So I think we need to create this brand. Is it going to be an explicit tagline? I don't think so. But figuring out more money how to brand the state and market the state to business and beyond, that is something we're working on.
I mean, I'm suggesting well beyond the tag. I mean, a true marketing effort to brand it, done by real professional companies who know how to do this, not a cute line or a picture of, say a grandfather sitting on an ice cream cone outside an ice cream shop and call it like Connecticut.
So
we need to be doing more than that.
I agree. It comes down to we got to figure out a way to pay for it, I guess. The funding for statewide marketing is what this is known as. It went from $15 million down to $4 million, and some of that $4 gets spent in many different ways. So to do a true effort, and listen, we're a small state relative to New York or Virginia that I mentioned, so I need to give some thought to, is there a responsible way to fund this? But I do think it is needed. On the second point on DEP, what I would say is the culture, I think, is changing, and I think this is one of the signatures under Lamont, is this spirit of collaboration between his commissioners and the executive branch agencies. So, I guess the question is, at the commissioner level, making sure that it goes all the way down through the staff, and holistically we're working together, and it's not adversarial to try to get business done, because, someone like yourself that's trying to do a deal, you're a client in my mind. It shouldn't be adversarial. We want to help you do things in Connecticut. So I hope that you're going to see more of that. Maybe you haven't seen it yet, but if you're not seeing it, call me, and I'm happy to help. I mean, I mentioned I talk to Katie regularly, and a lot of the issues are about whether it's wetlands or other permitting, or the pace isn't what one might want. We want that sense of urgency and that sense of collaboration to be there, and for folks like you to feel it, where you feel like your investment is welcome as opposed to roadblocks are being put up. So hopefully next time we're having this conversation, you're seeing some of that in place. But in the interim, if you're seeing a problem, call me and we'll work it out. Promise you. That's right. That's why Katie's number one on my speed dial. So. Any other questions? I'm not sure how we're doing time-wise. Yeah.
I have a question about the vision for transportation. I'm a transplant from Boston to address the one, but the thing about New Haven is it's a human scale city. You're able to walk around it. But when I first moved here, I said to my husband, I'd like to get into New Haven. Can I take a bus? And he laughed at me, because there is no way, if you're in North Branford, which is a very livable city, to get to New Haven. And New Haven has great, as people say, has great restaurants. Yale Art Gallery is free. I mean, there's wonderful things. If you're going to attract people to live here, they need to be able to get around a little bit more cars.
Yeah, so I will not purport to be an expert on bus service, or if there is any from here, but if not, that is something I might.
Is there a vision? Is there a vision?
For North Branford to New Haven bus service, or?
Well, just hold the whole area.
Well, so broadly, again, at a higher level, just because I'm not DOT expert on this, but mass transit is key to growing economies in cities. So if we cannot be reliant on cars or walking within who we are, so we need to embrace mass transit, and realistically, that is buses here versus installing train tracks, just from a economics perspective. Because the
so
subsidy
ride shares? Anything happening with businesses in ride shares?
Not that I'm aware of right now, but I would. So I'm happy to take it offline and involve DOT, but I think ultimately it is going to be embracing something like bus service on a more regular basis, where you feel like you can be 10 miles away from the Haven and still have access to all the amenities of these. Because otherwise we're not doing that, then we're losing out on economic growth. And I think the data is pretty clear. So a lot of this comes down to, we didn't spend a whole lot of time on here, but is this, how do we fund this? Because we can't put everything on the credit card or bond it. And at the same time, there is this crowding out question as it relates to the state budget, given we haven't funded pensions for generations. So I'm very sensitive to, no one wants to pay more taxes, I presume, which is a generally safe assumption. So how do we make sure that we're funding this responsibly in the context of our current tax revenue stream? And that is the challenge for a lot of these things. We're talking about marketing and buses. All of this stuff costs money. Yes, it would have been nice had we funded our pensions for the past 50 years, but we didn't do that until recently. So that eats $3 to $4 billion of the budget, round numbers of the $20 billion budget. And that the risk there is that crowds out other smart investments like what we're talking about here. So again, happy to take that offline, but I'm not sure. Yeah.
You said that you were going to push the guarantees for lending to the private sector. Like Innovations has been doing, and was it running through CI, or how is that going to work?
We're still going to figure out the right way to administer it, but it's going to be, if it's not CI, it's going to be someone that has real experience. So again, we talk about the Massachusetts model. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it. Okay, so BDC Capital performs this role where they basically work with banks, and they will encourage banks to make these guaranteed loans, capital access for business loans, where the state is taking a portion of risk in the loans. But the goal for the state is to let the private sector manage the client relationships, do the underwriting, make the decisions, and to the extent that we can be there to help, provide the proceeds or take a little risk to lower the cost of capital, we want to do that. But we don't want to compete at the state level with banks anymore.
So like the referrals will come through the ECD and then migrate over to CI, or is it?
We'll likely utilize whether CI or someone else, like a BDC, for example, and their goal would be to go out and talk to all the private lenders, banks and non-banks, and say, here's the program the state's working on, here's how you can take advantage of it. So, and if it comes to DECD, we would just basically suggest it, route it that way. Okay, well, thank you guys again very much for having me. Look forward to coming back.
Thank you, David, very much. I appreciate that. To wrap up, I've got two more individuals I'd like to recognize in terms of resources. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to introduce Kim Dawson from Shoreline Chamber of Commerce. Want to say a few words?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, just as another resource.
Good morning. I'm Kim Dawson from the Shoreline Chamber of Commerce. I'm here on behalf of the Chamber President, Sherry Cody, who was unable to attend this morning. As a chamber, it is our job to help maintain and develop the economic development of our community. And some of the ways we do that with the chamber is by hosting 70 to 75 business networking events, and also through providing a business website profile where our business owners could upload logos, photos, YouTube videos, job postings, and current and future events, press releases, to name a few. As far as our events go, we have, as I said, several different events, two of which we have are our monthly events, and we have our business after hours, which is 5:30 to 7:30, typically held on a last Thursday of the month, and our Net 90s, which are our morning meetings, typically held on the third Thursday of the month. Our most recent one was last Thursday at our very own Evergreen Woods in North Branford, who provided a beautiful breakfast. We go around the room and do a 45-second elevator pitch of every business owner, and then we open it up to open networking. Our business after hours, our next one is a multi-chamber, so it would have us, the Shoreline Chamber, and we cover North Branford, Branford, Guilford, and Guilford. And then there'll be the East Haven Chamber, the Madison Chamber, and the Clinton Chamber. Thimble Island Brewery will be hosting this event. It's January 28th. And we also are doing so they'll be providing, of course, the host will be providing the room and the beer. And we're also having a pizza competition. And we're very lucky to have all of our chambers participate and our business owners participating. So we currently have, I think, about 6 that are committed for our pizza parlors, 2 of which in our own town are Anthony Johns in North Branford, and also new business, Bell Foods and Pizzeria, where the old Sandy's used to be. We're doing a ribbon cutting for them tomorrow, just FYI, at 2 o'clock if anyone's interested in supporting them. And some of our bigger events that we do we have one coming up in February 27th, which is our 2020 annual dinner award ceremony, where we're able to meet and get to know our board members. And we also are hosting another one in Health and Wellness Fair in March, if anyone's interested. And as a quick side note, I'd just like to say that I am from North Branford, born and raised, so it holds a very dear part of my heart. And although I did move away for some time and search for something better, I did not find that and came back. And you know, I'm just very grateful and proud to be here, and grateful to be here today. So thank you for having me.
Thank you, Deb. Next, I'd like to recognize and ask Dottie Savastano to come forward as a representative for SCORE.
Thank you, Mike. I forgot to mention, we also have Pepe's in Worcester Square in New Haven, too.
Noted.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dottie Savastano, and I'm a certified business counselor and part of the executive board of the New Haven chapter of SCORE. For those of you who are not familiar with SCORE, it stands for Service Corps of Retired Executives, although many of our chapter volunteers are currently in their jobs, specifically a lot of attorneys and so on. And while we focus on entrepreneurs in our activities, one of which is every second Wednesday, we put on a pre-business workshop at Gateway Community College. We do other participating seminars at libraries, at schools, and so on. I just wanted to focus a little bit on existing businesses, since that's where my audience is here. And I would say, besides helping entrepreneurs, about 25% of our clients are existing businesses who want to move to the next level of their industry or their employment or whatever. Specifically, for example, I have one client, although all our client information is confidential, just in a broad sense. I had a client this year who increased his business or his bottom line income by 25%. What he needed to do was streamline his business management, focus on sales and marketing, specifically sales activities, and things that he hadn't focused on, like digital marketing and so on when he began his business. The only complaint that he had to me was that he had to pay more taxes. And when you make more income, you have to pay more taxes, and I try to point that out to him. But anytime that a small business starts as a mom and pop industry or small business, they work a lot of hours, they put a lot of time in, they do whatever they can, but they come to a point where they want to grow. And that's one thing that we do at SCORE. Not only entrepreneurs, but existing businesses, help them streamline their management and so on. We also partner with Liberty Bank, who puts on a small business academy every summer at the New Haven Public Library. It's an 8-week course, and they are primarily small businesses who are in business that want to grow in their business. And we focus not only on sales and marketing, but things like time management and so on. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we do for businesses that are currently doing a great job, but maybe want to grow. So, again, if anybody wants my business card, but we do mentoring at the Hamden Library in the evening. We do mentoring in our office on Washington Avenue above the Key Bank in North Haven. We are in several chambers that we use in Milford and so on. You can go to our website specifically for New Haven. It's newhaven.score.org for our local activities. But as a national organization, it is an arm of the SBA. There are 360 chapters nationally. There are 6 in Connecticut. There are about 1,200 volunteers, both retired and working. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. We're at your service, and hopefully some of you would take advantage of that and we could help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dottie. Great words, growth and expansion. We'd love to hear that. And so we've come to the near the end here. I just want to actually recognize Roger to come up here and just close for us and mention our upcoming event with Colin Cooper, as David mentioned as well. Thank you, Roger.
Thank you, Mike. On the 18th of February, we have Colin Cooper, who's going to be our guest speaker. He was invited today, but he's actually addressing the New Haven Manufacturers Association today. And we have some board members on that association. some of which are here and some of which are on the association meeting. So that's the 18th of February. Colin has joined in, what, the last 3 months or so?
1st of November.
Yeah. And Colin is a seasoned business developer in his own way, and we're very much interested in how our kind of a community can advance the progress towards skill building and manufacturing. So that's on the agenda on the 18th of February. We'll be sending out an invitation for that. I did want to mention the issue of energy costs in the state. I don't know if you want to add to that issue at all, David, or concern.
I'm going to let you run with that.
Well, one of the issues that we've found in talking to existing manufacturers, we have an advantage that some part of our community is under the service of Wallingford Electric. The other part is under United Illuminating. It's one of the highest cost energy providers in the country. And so that is a disadvantage to encourage manufacturers moving here. Ron, in his own organization, Engineering Specialties, has installed solar power on their factory. I don't know, Ron, do you want to just quickly mention how that's helped your cost of doing business?
It's helped us tremendously. We generate about 50% of what we use every year. And I give a plug to Dave DeMeo and a company he works with, Independent Solar, that without them, they did such a great job for us. It's unbelievable. So I highly encourage you to talk to Dave if you're interested in solar power.
So February the 18th, and we'll be sending out invitations. And thank you, David. It was great. Thank you, Mike, Dottie, and everyone. Any other questions for economic development? We have some of our department managers here. We're happy to take those. And thank you, Marcia, for abandoning the board members. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.